생각은 없습니다. 하지만 우리가 굉장히 특별한 것을 지금 하고 있다. 특별한 관계를 가지고 있다라고 생각하고 김 위원장과 또 북조선에 많은 존경심을 가지고 있습니다. 내가 보기에 북조선이 가진 그런 잠재력은 어느 나라와도 경쟁할 수 없을 만큼 그런 특별하고 강한 그런 잠재력이라고 생각합니다. 됐습니다. 다 끝났습니다.
우리한테 시간이 귀중한데 우리한테 좀 들어가셔야 우리 이야기.
Thank you all very much. We're going to start a discussion now with our teams, and thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Kim, are you hopeful? Thank you. Thank you.
No rush. No rush. No rush. There's no rush. We just want to do the right deal. Chairman Kim and myself, we want to do the right deal.
옳은 그 합의를 이루어야 된다.
What's important is that we do the
가장
right
중요한
deal.
것은 옳은 합의를
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys. Chairman Kim, are you confident? Thank you.
김 위원장님 자신 있으십니까?
적당하긴 있다고 생각합니다.
Well, it's too early to tell.
예단하긴 않겠습니다.
But I wouldn't say that I'm pessimistic.
그러나 나의 직감으로 보면 좋은 결과가 생길 거라고 믿습니다.
But from what I feel right now, I do have a feeling that good results would come out.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want you to send Chairman Kim a picture.
Thank you, President.
You want to come up?
Right this way.
You want to come up?
All right, as you can see, President Trump and Kim Jong-un of North Korea, as you can see, just fed live here in Hanoi, Vietnam, and we have a lot going on tonight. Now, this obviously building on the first summit that took place in Singapore, where in the lead up to that summit, remember that President Trump, after many months of rockets being fired over Japan, the threatening of Guam, the entire Korean peninsula, and even threatening the continental United States, those rockets have stopped. In the meantime, in the interim, hostages released, and the remains of American brave soldiers have been sent home. What are the expectations for tonight? Well, nobody really knows. We do expect that there's going to be a joint signing coming up later tonight, and this meeting is scheduled to go on for about 40 minutes, and when it wraps up, we will be bringing you the reaction live. We'll also have an interview with the president that will air tomorrow night, immediately following this show tonight. Just here for a quick roundup of what you just heard, what we can expect. We have Fox News contributors Dan Hoffman, Dan Bongino. Dan Hoffman, by the way, has been appointed to President Trump's Intelligence Advisory Board, along with Fox News chief national correspondent and Salem Radio America First host Sebastian Gorka, holding down the fort back in D.C. First, congratulations. How many years? You have been in the intel community for how many years? 30?
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
Amazing. And you scare the living daylights out of all of us when we travel. What's so amazing about this, and I'll get to the whole political side of things later, but what's amazing about this is about long-term safety security for not just the Korean Peninsula, but for the entire area, our allies, better relations with China. There's a lot of good that has already come out of it, and a lot more good that can come out of it. And more importantly, when you're talking about hitting the continental United States, Boston, New York, with a nuclear weapon, and what we were hearing before the first summit, this would be, if this can get accomplished, this would be major history.
You know, just for a little bit of perspective, India and Pakistan, two sworn enemies, nuclear armed, are shooting down each other's fighter aircraft. And the last thing we want to do is miss this opportunity that the president has created to dial down the tension in our relationship with North Korea and put us on that path towards arms control as a pit stop and then denuclearization.
Yeah, and Dan Bongino, we'll get to the politics, but more importantly, the prospects of this, and that's why the petty politics going back in Washington, where I can't imagine if Republicans, while President Obama were overseas negotiating something as important as the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and Republicans put on this cartoon back in Washington, whatever you want to call it, circus. It was, I know the outrage would be immediate, it would be universal, but stay focused on what this could accomplish, what we expect.
Well, we have a lot of leverage right now, and I think President Trump gets that. I think his business background and getting out of that foreign policy D.C. bubble, being an outsider to politics, helps him. We have leverage, Sean. They're starving. Remember, the North Koreans need something we can provide: hard currency, economic growth. As I've said repeatedly here, it's not just that they can't feed their people. I sincerely doubt Kim cares about that, but what he does care about is the ability with a verifiable, viable currency to pay his military. If you can't keep your military happy, it does you no good as a tyrant, as Maduro's finding out now in socialist Venezuela, which is collapsing in front of his very eyes, and they've had mass defections. They need hard currency. That's the reason the symbolism of Vietnam matters to Trump, and I think it was a genius idea to bring Kim here to say, hey, look what can happen when we normalize relationships a bit. It was a smart move on his part.
The most important thing I think has to come out of any real deal that's going to be meaningful at Henry is it's got to be verifiable. It's got to be inspections on demand.
Absolutely.
It's got to be no closed off areas, and they've got to show some real progress in terms of taking down the nuclear threat.
They do, but what Democrats don't want to admit is there's been progress already, and that President Trump inherited this problem from Barack Obama. When President Trump came to office, the threshold that was crossed by the North Koreans that led President Trump to take all this heat for talking about Little Rocket Man and fire and fury raining down from the U.S. military was because Kim Jong-un had passed the threshold of getting a miniature nuclear weapon and putting it in a missile. And as you said at the top of the show, could potentially reach Boston, New York, Chicago. That's real. That is remarkable.
They were saying it.
They were saying it, but they were testing. They were testing, getting to the point where it appeared that they could get a miniaturized nuclear weapon into a missile and reach the shores of the United States. You can't get more serious than that. And instead, the opposite has happened. They're now at the peace table, and tensions have been ratcheted down. It doesn't mean that President Trump has solved this. You're right. We need it to be verifiable. They need denuclearization, where inspectors go in and see what North Korea has and actually make sure that it ratchets down. But let's remember how much progress the president's already made.
Great point, and obviously they've got to be building on it, or I don't think the president, and I have a lot of respect for the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, would even be here. You mentioned about real difficulties. How do you maintain an army if they're not being fed well? The real carrot seems to be, hey, America's going to help open up the trade and lift economic sanctions, which have not been lifted. Right. And this is going to be wealth, opportunity, energy, trade. You know, all these opportunities will now come to the North Korean people. That is probably in the long-term best interest, not only of the people, but if Kim Jong-un wants to survive, his long-term interest. And I want to go off something also Ed Henry said, and that is, you know, think of what we played last night. Little Rocket Man, Fire and Fury, my button's bigger than yours, and my button actually works. And everybody politically on the left, oh no, it's like the evil empire. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, and he's gonna create a nuclear holocaust. Just the opposite happens when you're not bribing dictators. We know that Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, was bribed by Bill Clinton and the mullahs in Iran.
Yeah, 94. And you know what's fascinating about it is Trump keeps emphasizing there's no rush as the liberal media jumps all over him. But Sean, you remember well, Reykjavik with Reagan. Liberal media, oh, what a failure. It was an abomination with Gorbachev.
He walked away from the table.
Over a word. They didn't agree to laboratory testing over SDI at the time.
Strategic defense, right.
Yeah, what they called Star Wars, where they tried to take a shot at Reagan for it.
Well, they were mocking it.
They were mocking it. And they said, what a fool. He had this great deal from it, and he walked away. And what happened a year later, in 1987? INF was signed. So Trump's playing this smart. I'm noticing it now, though. There's a slow turn. The hacks are going to stay the hacks, but some of the more sane, semi-rational people on the left are starting to finally come around and say this might not be as bad as we think it is.
You know, Dan.
Yeah, I was going to say that, you know, Vietnam, we've talked about this as a great backdrop for this historic summit. What really turbocharged Vietnam's economy was when we normalized relations in 1995. And if there's ever a better, I think, example to North Korea, which is an outlier in arguably one of the most economically vibrant regions in the world, this is it. And I think that's what presents us this outstanding opportunity. And I would just echo what Dan just said. The president was very measured in his comments. He said, we're in no rush. I want to do the right deal. Mm-hmm. That's precisely the way to begin these bilateral discussions today.
Let me go to Sebastian Gorka. You know, a lot of people, I've known President Trump for a lot of years, long before he ever thought about Dr. Gorka running for president. One of the things that he says in The Art of the Deal is up to the last second, you always must be willing to stand up and walk away from a deal. You don't do a deal because you want a deal. You do a deal because it works for you, and if it doesn't, you got to be willing to walk away.
Yeah, it's one of the very first rules, and I tell everybody, you've got to read The Art of the Deal. One of the first things he said, you have got to be prepared to walk away from the table at any point, never be so vested that they can have leverage over you. Sean, can I tell you a quick story? I had a caller on my radio show today who was a Democrat, and he said, today I am becoming a Republican. Why did he do that, Sean? Because he watched the Cohen testimony and he was absolutely disgusted. He said, we have one man, the president, who's trying to bring peace and stop a nuclear war. And what are the Democrats doing? They're trying to sabotage it with this circus in D.C. That man became a Republican today because of what the president is doing and what the left is trying to do to sabotage him. You are right there. He's making history, and potentially this is the first time in 66 years that we can bring peace to the Korean Peninsula. Truly historic event.
If you're thinking about future generations, wow, pretty powerful. When you're thinking about potential conflicts down the road and the magnitude of destruction of the weaponry we're discussing here, that would be pretty profound. Stay right there, and I'm going to have a lot to say about what happened in Washington later in the program, my opening monologue coming up. And let me go back to this meeting was scheduled to go on about 40 minutes.
That's right.
About 30 minutes from now. We expect it might end or might be extended. We'll see. And what do we expect afterwards?
Sure.
They met for dinner last night.
Right. And to your point, dinner last night, the president kicked it off and said, look, this is going to be quick. All the business will be on day 2. And instead of being quick, they had dinner for about 2 hours or so. That suggests, A, maybe some warm relations, as we've seen in the public comments, and they're getting to know each other more. But B, maybe starting to get some business done. What's going to be in this agreement? About 9:45 p.m. Eastern time, as you say, they're going to have an expanded group with the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and others getting in there. That's where you start getting into granular detail, perhaps. And then about 11:45 back home, about noon here, you're going to have a working lunch, just like they had dinner last night. We anticipate in the middle of the night back home, there could be some sort of a signing ceremony. That's at least what the White House is planning for.
Well, we expect a signing ceremony, and we're anticipating an official end, at least to the Korean War, which officially is not over.
Right. And decades later. I want to make a quick point to follow up on what you said a moment ago, too. I did some research as we prepped. What were people saying at the beginning of the Trump administration about this problem? Nick Kristof, New York Times, April 2017. President Trump is scary in many ways, but perhaps the most frightening nightmare is of him blundering into a new Korean War. April 20th, 2017, New York Times. Here we are almost 2 years later, and the opposite is. I'm not saying we're out of the woods. This is a serious, serious threat. But what this president has done in the last year and a half or so has done just the opposite of what the critics predict.
It's fascinating because this happened. This is history repeating itself. And you mentioned Reykjavik, and we talked about Mr. Gorbachev tearing down this wall, the evil empire speech, and even the axis of evil with President Bush. There is a very distinct philosophical difference when it comes to foreign policy. Bill Clinton tried, this is a good deal for the American people. He was trying to bribe Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, and it didn't work. And promises that were made were never kept. There's got to be verification. There's got to be on-site demand access, or otherwise it's impossible for any of this to work. It's sort of like peace through strength works. Fire, fury, my button's bigger than yours and it works, and Little Rocket Man, just mocking him for a time. Now saying they're in love.
Would be key. I think IAEA access would be mandatory. And really, I think a ground-level entrance marker for success, Sean, would be, let's just get an account of what they have at this point. He's taking it slow. I like that. There is no need to rush. But let's see what they have, and more importantly, let's see their technical capabilities. There's a lot of uncertainty out there about what even their re-entry possibilities are on their missiles, and that's something we need to know.
Last word we give Dan. Before we go to my opening monologue.
Inventory is obviously really important. I think your point about inspectors, maybe North Korea rejoining the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty would be important because inspectors are mandated if you're accepting that treaty. And then one thing I would also look for is the establishment of working groups, because I think the president and Kim Jong-un will establish a broad agreement, hopefully, and then these working groups will take on those issues over the coming months and manage
media expectations. If it doesn't end this second, this isn't progress.
Right.
I think getting the remains back from the 1950s was profound, especially for the families of heroes. I thought getting hostages released, I'm always happy when Americans are coming home. And I also believe that when the rockets stop being fired, amazing, you know, that a little bit of strength and commitment and maybe a healthy dose of fear.
What about Susan Rice saying today from the Obama administration that maybe the Iran nuclear deal is a good model for President Trump in these talks? Does anyone think that's a good idea?
I could see President Trump. He's going to take Air Force One with $150 billion, land it right here, right in North Korea, Pyongyang.
This is a slightly different approach on the ground in Vietnam.
And then all of us, $150 will buy you a lot of peace for about a week. And that's about it. All right, we'll get back to all of you. Thank you so much. We expect updates within the hour. It has now officially begun. President Trump, Kim Jong-un, the summit now in progress. But we begin with a little later opening monologue. I want you to remember this day, and for this reason, because what took place today is a defining moment, both here in Vietnam and back in Washington in American politics, because what we're witnessing are two radically, distinctly different agendas that have been now laid bare for all to see. At the very same moment, as you can see, a historic summit with the President of the United States, who traveled 20-plus hours to Vietnam for a second summit, negotiating a safer world for our kids and our grandkids. What were the Democrats in Washington doing? They purposely scheduled and hauled in Michael Cohen, day 2, today, of course, televised the entire day of testimony, and one more day tomorrow. Why? Just to embarrass the president they have this psychotic hate for. Now, today, on the very day the president is holding this historic, high-stakes summit, think of your kids here. How profound in the future this may be for them or your grandkids. The denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, no more rockets being fired all over that part of the world, threats to here, threats to Guam. House Democrats, they had a more important agenda. They want to embarrass the president while he is now in negotiations and put on a circus, a spectacle in Washington, D.C. So I want you to just embrace the magnitude of this moment, because Democrats clearly are showing their true colors. This should be a day, no red, no blue, no conservative, no liberal, no Republican or Democrat. It's about safety and security for all of us. You know what? If a rocket hits some country, innocent people die. Well, and we could have stopped it because we now have clear evidence revealing exactly what they care about and what they don't care about. Make no mistake about this. Safety and security of you, the people, is certainly not at the top of their list. Instead, they would have put off these hearings to next week. Now, instead, this insatiable hatred for the president, it now consumes all of their actions, all of their thoughts. As I've been saying, every second, every minute, every hour of every day of every month, and frankly, every year since 2015, and Donald Trump came down that escalator in Trump Tower. And what we're seeing in Hanoi is an American leader fighting to make the world a better, safer place. What we saw in Washington all day, just hours ago, nonstop, was a Democratic Party, a hyperventilating, hysterical media putting politics over country with a political charade designed to just embarrass and trash the president while he represents our country abroad. I thought politics stopped at the, border's edge, right? No. That's why the House Oversight Committee called on Michael Cohen, who was just convicted of lying to Congress, to once again testify now before Congress. And it was just petty partisan politics. It was a circus. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, I think, put it so well earlier today. Take a look.
What did you talk to Mr. Schiff about? Mr. Chairman, here we go. Here we go. Your first big hearing, your first announced witness, Michael Cohen. I want everyone in this room to think about this. The first announced witness for the 116th Congress is a guy who is going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress. Mr. Chairman, your chairmanship will always be identified with this hearing. And we all need to understand what this is. This is the Michael Cohen hearing presented by Lanny Davis. That's right. Lanny Davis choreographed the whole darn thing. The Clintons' best friend, loyalist, operative, Lanny Davis put this all together.
Can you imagine if the president gets this accomplished? Wow. Some people might say he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize more than Obama. Now, Congressman Jordan was right on. This is nothing more than a political stunt, a hit job, a circus, highly orchestrated by, yes, the biggest Clinton supporter on the entire earth, Lanny Davis, who is apparently representing Michael Cohen for free, along with Democratic members of Congress and, yes, Michael Cohen himself. Here's the evidence. Let's take a look.
What did you talk to Mr. Schiff about?
I spoke to Mr. Schiff about topics that were going to be raised at the upcoming hearing.
Whoa. Not just what time to show up, actually what you're going to talk about?
The gentleman's time expired.
Wow.
Oh, now we tell people what we're going to ask them ahead of time so they can prepare all their answers. Lying Adam Schiff, the biggest liar in Congress, he was caught colluding again. Yeah, remember the tape of him, talking to somebody he thought was a Russian, giving them dirt on Donald Trump? Sounds like collusion. Now, also, Congressman Jordan got to the very heart of why the president's former personal attorney is now participating in this political hit job against his former boss. A whole sad saga. Watch this.
Mr. Cohen, how long did you work in the White House?
I never worked in the White House.
And that's the point, isn't it, Mr. Cohen?
No, sir.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not, sir.
You wanted to work in the White House.
No, sir.
You didn't get brought to the dance.
Sir.
And now?
I was extremely proud to be personal attorney to the President of the United States of America. I did not want to go to the White House.
Now, there are multiple sources that Michael Cohen was, in fact, wanting a job and lobbying for a job at the White House. Southern District of New York, who prosecuted Cohen, they stated, quote, the following: during and after the campaign, Cohen privately told friends and colleagues, including in seized text messages, that he expected to be given a prominent role and title in the new administration. And think about this. That means, under oath, that people cared more about their agenda. Michael Cohen is already going to jail, and they put him at further risk for further charges down the road. Now, that was not the only inconsistency. He also said that the president didn't want to win the election at all, but then later said that Trump wanted to win at all costs, and even hinting at collusion, but without any evidence. He accused the president of campaign finance violations as it relates to Stormy Daniels, also said that the payment was intended to protect his brand because running for president was just one big marketing campaign. If it was a marketing campaign, the only collusion might have been, Trump Tower Moscow, which everybody knew about, and so much more. Take a look.
We know Mr. Cohen has been dishonest in the past. That's why he's going to prison in 2 months. But there are things today that he said during the several hours of questioning that just don't add up either. He said he never defrauded any bank when he was having a conversation questioning from Mr. Comer. Obviously, that's not true because he's going to prison for that very offense. Your first big hearing, the first announced witness of the 116th Congress, is a gentleman who is going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress. I don't think that's what we should be focused on.
By the way, Fox News just got word that there might be a walk in just mere minutes with the president and Kim Jong-un as the summit is now underway here in Hanoi in Vietnam. Now, here's the problem. Democrats don't care one bit about Michael Cohen and his family. Not at all. Because they were the ones calling him every name in the book until fairly recently. Now, as a result of their partisan hatred of Trump, they don't care about Michael Cohen. They don't care about his family. And they may have put him in further legal jeopardy with the Southern District of New York that seemed pretty mad at him already on issues involving inconsistencies. For nearly 7 hours under oath at the request of House Democrats, Michael Cohen was frankly used by Democrats on this historic day to advance what is now a psychotic hate Trump mob that exists in this country. Yet during all the testimony, we saw no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. We saw no evidence of any crimes committed by the president. Nothing. In fact, Michael Cohen himself actually shot down some of the hate Trump media mob's favorite conspiracies. I'm sure this is hurting them a little. Watch this.
Questions have been raised about whether I know of direct evidence that Mr. Trump or his campaign colluded with Russia. I do not.
Have you ever been to Prague?
I've never been to Prague.
Never. you aware of anything that the president has done at home or abroad that may have subjected him to or may subject him to extortion or blackmail?
I am not, no.
Okay. Are you aware of any videotapes that may be the subject of extortion or blackmail?
I've heard about these tapes for a long time. I've had many people contact me over the years. I have no reason to believe that that tape exists.
So you had a conversation with the President of the United States about your impending testimony before the House Intelligence Committee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What was the nature of that conversation?
He wanted me to cooperate.
There you have it. The media's Russian collusion, hysteria, 2 long years, total BS by their new BFF. Nothing more than a conspiracy theory, and just like we've been telling you, but there is real Russia collusion, as we've chronicled. We won't go into that tonight. Without a doubt, Michael Cohen has been through a lot. His family has been through a lot. And Michael Cohen pled guilty to multiple felonies. He's lost his law license. He's now facing 3 years in prison. There is absolutely nothing for him to gain from today's political theater. And the question is, why would Democrats, if they didn't have a political agenda, open up Michael Cohen and his family to even greater risk? You saw all of that play out today in real time. Look at the House Freedom Caucus chairman, Mark Meadows, issuing a criminal referral over Cohen's testimony today. Great job, Democrats. You really helped out your friend. Take a look.
Did you have foreign contracts over the last 2 years?
Foreign contracts.
Contracts with foreign entities. Did you have contracts? Yes.
Yes.
Why didn't you put them on the form? Nothing to do with lobbying. It says it's a criminal offense to not list all your foreign contracts. That's what it says.
Well, then I'm going to take a look at it before I leave.
You know, it's just one more example, Mr. Cohen, of you skirting the truth.
Now, Congressman Meadows will be with us later in the show, but look at what the Democrats, because they so want to smear President Trump, think they cared about Michael Cohen or his family. Now he's facing more legal issues, more trouble for his life and his family. And that's no concern to the radical far-left Democratic Party, the ones that are so compassionate, willing to smear, slander, besmirch around anybody, any place, any time. That's why radical socialist Congresswoman, watch Tlaib, remember, actually implying that Congressman Mark Meadows was a racist for bringing an African-American former Trump Organization employee to the hearing to vouch for the president. An incredible exchange. Also showed a lot about the chairman of this committee right now, Elijah Cummings. Take a look at this.
The fact that someone would actually use a prop, a black woman, in this chamber, in this committee, is alone racist in itself.
Mr. Chairman, there's nothing more personal to me than my relationship. My nieces and nephews are people of color. Not many people know that. You know that, Mr. Chairman. And to indicate that I asked someone who is a personal friend of the Trump family, who has worked for him, who knows this particular individual, that she's coming in to be a prop, it's racist to suggest that I asked her to come in here for that reason.
Mr. Meadows, you know, and of all the people on this committee, I've said it and got in trouble for it, that you're one of my best friends. I know that shocks a lot of people.
And likewise, Mr. Chairman.
But you are. And I could see and feel your pain. We can just straighten this up.
Mr. Chairman, and to my colleague, Mr. Meadows, that was not my intention, and I do apologize if that's what it sounded like, but I said someone in general.
Yeah, she was talking about Mark Meadows and wouldn't admit it. By the way, what incredible, I don't agree with Congressman Elijah Cummings, incredible grace, class, what a moment for him and Mark Meadows. Is that, by the way, the same Congresswoman that called the president a mother bleep during the rally, the same person who pals around with Linda Sarsour, a virulent anti-Semite, and actually wrote a column for Louis Farrakhan's newspaper? She represents all that is wrong with today's modern, extreme, radical Democratic Socialist Party. It's their actions, their conduct, their beliefs couldn't be any more disgraceful. It's a party consumed by hate, radical ideas. They can't even put politics aside at the water's edge for 1 week and support this vitally important mission of the president abroad. A party now embracing socialism over capitalism, a party supporting an insane Green New Deal over real-life prosperity of the American people, a party voting against a bill that would protect babies born alive that survived an abortion, a party that wants to abolish ICE, even knock down the wall that protects us. We still get 90% of heroin in this country. They want unfettered illegal immigration, open borders. A party that trashed your right to due process unless it impacts a member of their own party. In other words, Kavanaugh versus the lieutenant governor of Virginia. A party that doesn't value the rule of law, our Constitution, our way of life that has created wealth, happiness, prosperity for more people than any other governmental system in the history of mankind, and we have shared it with the world. A Democratic Party, this was a national disgrace today. What we saw in Washington. Joining us now. By the way, we expect any moment, by the way, the president and Kim Jong-un will be stepping out. When they do, we'll go to that. We won't take your time. House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows is with us. Congressman, I know you as well. First of all, what class that the chairman showed there.
He's a good friend, and
I thought it was a great moment, a great moment for him and for civility, even when you have strong political disagreements.
I totally agree, Sean, and Elijah and I have been working on the things that we can agree upon, but today he certainly came to my defense, and I appreciate it, and I don't mind saying that not only is he a friend, but he was a gentleman today in the way that he came to my defense.
I thought it was a pretty amazing moment. All right. Now, as I've been saying, I watched this unfold, and I'm thinking, wow. On the day the president, we have a live shot up. There's John Bolton standing by, along with Sarah Sanders. And we watch this unfold while the president is here negotiating this. Let's get your reaction. And they put Michael Cohen in major legal jeopardy as evidenced by your criminal referral today.
Yeah, so it's not just the criminal referral that I put forth today. There's probably another criminal referral coming. Jim Jordan and I, that he did a masterful job today in really getting to the truth. We're working on that. Our staff is working on that tonight. Hopefully we'll have some additional news tomorrow. But here's the other interesting fact. A lot of people tonight are humming "Ding Dong, the witch is dead," because the witch hunt, the Russia collusion narrative, it was thrown out there over and over and over again, and what happened was there was nothing there. And so for this this unbelievable hearing today, you know, there were a lot of opportunities afforded this particular witness that shouldn't have happened. He had a 30-minute opening. I don't remember any witness ever having a 30-minute opening. It was all trying to spin a narrative to start the impeachment process.
You know, one person that was lied about repeatedly in Hillary Clinton's bought and paid for Russian dossier was Michael Cohen and the president. They share that in common. And to have that debunked and then look at it through the prism of it being the bulk of information for 4 separate FISA warrants, the warning by Bruce Orr that it's unverified, that Hillary paid for it, and Steele hates Trump, and that it was used to deny the constitutional rights of an American citizen and spy on an opposition party candidate in a presidential election year.
Well, you're exactly right. Senator Graham was mentioning this earlier this evening, is, you know, when you look at Prague and what was said, I mean, Michael Cohen said he'd never been to the Czech Republic, and that was part of the dossier. What we find is the more we peel back the onion, the more we realize that not only the dossier was not truth, but it was blatantly false. And so really, I think most Americans saw today for what it was. This was a Democrat really theater that was created to try to make sure that the president had as much injury as he possibly could while he's negotiating in Vietnam on probably the most important national thing we have.
If it was the Republican Party doing this to Barack Obama, what do you think the media, the Democratic reaction would be if, let's say, Barack Obama was in a situation where he was negotiating such an important deal?
Well, it would be a totally different standard, Sean. You know that. I think the real key for any of us as statesmen is when we have our president abroad. We shouldn't be criticizing him. We shouldn't be trying to lay out and undermine his credibility. But that's exactly what happened today, and I think it's a sad day for America.
Well, politics is supposed to end at the water's edge, not today. Today was a national disgrace for them to schedule this during this time. They could have waited. They purposely did this. And sad for them and the American people, the future of the country is on a lot of these issues. Congressman, thank you for sharing your time with us today. And a great moment, I thought, for two people that have political differences, both you and Congressman Cummings, and I applaud you both for that.
Well, thank you, Sean. Take care. We're hoping for the best today.
Everybody should be. Yeah, that's right. Should be something for everybody. We bring in now Senator Lindsey Graham from the great state of South Carolina. Senator, you were extremely outspoken today about what was happening in Washington versus what we now see unfolding live at this very moment, which is Kim Jong-un, President Trump, now negotiating the denuclearization of the entire peninsula. Thoughts?
It was disrespectful to President Trump. It undercut our foreign policy. I talked to President Trump last night. He didn't appreciate very much having this hearing while he's trying to get the North Koreans to give up their nuclear arsenal. I can only imagine if we'd pulled this stunt, what would be happening to us on every major network in the country. So I'm very disappointed.
Senator, if I may, if I can, there is, so Kim Jong-un and the president, they spent about, well, 34 minutes or 30-some-odd minutes alone together. As Ed Henry just told us moments ago, that they're now going to bring in, Ed, their teams.
Yeah, these are their interpreters walking with them. This is the pool at the historic Metropole Hotel. And they're going to be walking over to the expanded group. And there they are, as we said earlier.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
And his counterpart on the North Korean side. We expect maybe someone like Mick Mulvaney, John Bolton, who we saw waiting just off stage left there a moment ago, might join as well. So they're just about almost on time. They were talking about 9:45 a.m. local time here, 9:45 p.m. Eastern back home, that they would be having what they call an expanded bilateral meeting with the top
I don't know pictures if you can interpret it, but a lot of smiles, a lot of personality. Look, you can see Kim Jong-un seems very relaxed. It's very cordial.
The president
friendly.
said a few moments ago when reporters were there, I wonder if Chairman Kim is willing to say what he said to us at dinner last night. I'm going to let him decide whether he's going to say it publicly. He didn't quite get there. He just said something very general, Chairman Kim, about how he expects positive results. But you can clearly read that President Trump, and you'll have a chance in the interview to ask him, suggested that at dinner last night, Chairman Kim went much further in private than he has in public.
You know, a lot of times, Dan Bongino, a lot of these things, as you can see, they're now walking in with the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and his counterpart from North Korea. Oftentimes, there are predetermined outcomes.
Sure.
Not necessarily here, except for maybe ending the Korean War.
Yeah, matter of fact, most of the time, bottom-up diplomacy is exactly how it occurs. You have your lower-level bureaucrats lay out the groundwork for a meeting before it ever gets to the level of the president. He's taken it in a different direction. He said, we're going to handle this from the top.
Let me go back to Senator Lindsey Graham back in Washington. It's so deep and it's so profound, Senator, the potential that what can happen here.
Right.
Look, I'm not Pollyannish. We know that we've got to have, this has got to be a verified deal. There's got to be open access and inspections on demand, or else it's not going to work for anybody.
Right.
But it's important.
Well, the question is, why are we having this meeting? I mean, why is Trump meeting with North Korea when North Korea wouldn't meet with anybody else? I think President Trump rattled North Korea. I think they believe that President Trump would use military force to stop their nuclear missile program if he had to. He took them seriously, and Trump's giving them a way out. Chairman Kim, if you're smart, you'll take the way out given to you by President Trump. If you're actually trying to play the guy, you're going to regret this effort.
You know, it's so funny. I mentioned having known the president for over 2 decades, I have some insight into his thinking. In my personal opinion, this is just purely speculation, that we were likely just 1, 2, 3 rockets away from the United States taking that out of the air and a major escalation.
Okay, I talked to President Trump about couple hours ago, right before he went to meet with the North Korean leader. I talked to him all last year. The fire and fury rhetoric was sincere. The North Koreans believed that if they fired another missile, they were going to get attacked. They were going to get attacked. And here's what I would say. The president's giving them a chance to maintain their security, increase their prosperity, and in return, he wants them to give up their nukes. This is the last best chance for peace. If this doesn't work, we're not going back to the status quo. So everybody in America and the world should pray for a good outcome here. But the reason that Kim is at the table, he believes that Trump is hell-bent on stopping him one way or the other, and the best way is a win-win.
You know, so there's always that point when Reagan walked away from the table at Reykjavik, and yet the media went insane. When Reagan talked about the evil empire, they went insane. When Bush talked about the axis of evil, they went insane. When he challenged Gorbachev to tear down the wall, there seems to be a pattern. You know, we've been around too long. But there seems to be this pattern, and that is that the Democrats feel, and it's just, I find it Neville Chamberlain-ish and Pollyannish and naive and frankly dangerous, that somehow if they bribe dictators and the world's despots, Bill Clinton tried it with Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, and we know that Obama tried it with the mullahs in Iran. Oh, if we give you $150 billion in cash and other currencies, maybe you'll like us? No, they're still chanting death to America and threatening to annihilate Israel and wipe it off the map. But strength seems to get their attention. And I believe that you're right. The president absolutely was believable in the hearts and minds of the North Koreans and Kim Jong-un.
All I can tell you is if Susan Rice gives you some advice, Mr. President, don't take it. The Iran deal has not worked out well for everybody in the
Everybody here is laughing. That's really good.
Well, so the bottom line is if a guy's threatened to cut your throat, don't buy him a knife. John Kerry walked through glass to get a crappy deal with Iran. Trump is smart enough to get out of that deal. And he says, I'm not in a hurry. I want a good deal. I want a real deal. A real deal with North Korea is they give up their nukes. We end the Korean War, and we have peace and prosperity for everybody on the peninsula. A bad deal is to continue for North Korea to build up their nuclear forces, and Trump's not going to let that. He's called the question.
Hey, you want to make the media's head spin? You really want the hate Trump mob to go insane right now?
It's not that hard.
Now, Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize for nothing, just for showing up.
For not being Bush.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So imagine, let's hope for the best. I thought liberals imagined a world without nukes. All right, how about a world with fewer nukes to start? Imagine they get this deal done and it's verifiable, on-demand inspections, and imagine it's done. Are they going to have to now melt down? People may actually have real heart attacks if somebody says, if it happens, maybe Trump gets the Nobel Peace Prize.
A world in which
would be a good thing for the world and our kids.
A world in which Donald Trump gets the Nobel Peace Prize is probably more dangerous in the eyes of the liberals than North Korea and having nukes. But the point is that he's on the verge of a breakthrough, I hope, but he is not going to let this go forward the way it's been in the past. Either we're going to have peace or we're eventually going to have a military conflict. I think North Korea realizes that's the two choices they have.
All right, Senator, thank you. I know, and you're right about what happened today. What a dramatic comparison. How shallow, pathetic, and frankly sad. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, while the president is right here in Hanoi, in Vietnam, pursuing peace, denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, to create, what, a safer world potentially for your kids and grandkids, Democrats back in Washington, we saw grandstanding over what? Phony Russia collusion, something they've talked about for 2 years. Their newly embraced best friend, who they hated up until recently, Michael Cohen, the circus, the sideshow, all day long as the president's here. Geraldo Rivera pointed out, quote, the backstabbing, personal betrayal of Trump will fail. Sarah Carter wrote the headline that Michael Cohen's testimony read like a jilted lover. John Solomon even compared it to the famous song, Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. Joining us now is all three of them. Fox News investigative reporter Sarah Carter, John Solomon from The Hill, and Fox News correspondent Geraldo Rivera, Geraldo at large and best-selling author. Geraldo, let me start with you. You're so passionate about this. You saw this go on today. It didn't have to happen today. They want to play politics. Okay, not today.
I think it was pathetic, the timing. You used the word shallow and pathetic. I absolutely agree with that, Sean. They easily could have postponed it 48 hours, 72 hours to let the world focus on this profoundly significant event. But there's something that I need to tell people that they have to be reinforced about. A week ago, McCabe, the former acting director of the FBI, was promoting his book, saying that it was possible that the President of the United States was a traitor, was an agent of the Russian Federation. He said it was possible. He was asked the question repeatedly. It was possible. It was possible. So you had President Trump being suspected of treason just a week ago. Now where are we? Zero. Nada. None. Absolute this much evidence of collusion with the Russia. There is no Russian collusion. It is a fantasy.
Look what he said
it is about time that we... Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, no, it's about, finish that thought. It's about time. I'm sorry.
No, I just think that when you consider how far we've come in just a week, now we have Michael Cohen saying there's no collusion. We have Michael Cohen saying he was never in Prague, Czechoslovakia. We have Michael Cohen saying that he was never told by President Trump to lie about the timing of the negotiations for the Moscow Tower. This thing is over. Let's get it behind us. Now it's all going to be about Stormy Daniels. You're going to see how MSNBC and CNN go seamlessly from Russia collusion to, oh, he paid off the porn star. It is pathetic.
Yeah, it's pathetic. Journalism